Journalist Amir Tibon, a resident of Kibbutz Nahal Oz who spent hours under fire as his father armed up and raced to intervene. Amir, I am glad that you are with us. Can you tell us your story?
Good to be with you. My story is one of thousands of survival stories of this terrible day, October 7th, that we will never forget and has become one of the most important dates in the history of our country. For me, it started like a regular Saturday in my home in Kibbutz Nahal Oz with my wife and two daughters. But shortly after 6 a.m., a barrage of rockets and mortars began to fall on our community, specifically in my neighborhood. And so my wife and I raced to the safe room that we have in our home. Every home in the Gaza border communities has a room that is built of a strong concrete where families usually put the kids to sleep. Our two daughters were there sleeping. We locked the door. We shut the safe room window, which is a heavy window built out of iron, and it's completely dark. Soon later, the electricity fell out, and we thought it was just a rocket attack, which is something we've experienced over the years because we've lived in Nahal Oz for about 7 years. We've had some experiences over the time, and it's a beautiful community. We love living there, and we knew that sometimes there were tense days, and it was part of the deal. But we never expected what came next, which was a full infiltration of Hamas into our community. Shortly after 7 a.m., we could hear Hamas terrorists directly outside our window, shouting commands in Arabic, shooting ammunition into our home. Luckily, our home was locked. The doors were locked. The windows were all shut, and so were the shades. But they shot a lot of ammunition into our house. They destroyed our cars. They tried to break into the house. There was a small group of very, very brave fighters in our community, about 10 fighters from a special unit of the Israeli police who were stationed inside the kibbutz. And they were joined by 3 members of our local security team. And for long hours, these 13 people fought a heroic battle against 100 terrorists. They were outgunned, they were outnumbered, they could not save everyone in the community. At the same time that this was happening and we were sheltering with our 2 daughters in the safe room, I contacted my parents who live in Tel Aviv, and I told them, this is what's happening. There are terrorists outside our window. And my father, who is over 60, and he's a retired general in the Israeli military, he took his pistol and he started driving with my mother toward our kibbutz. It's about an hour and 15 minutes from Tel Aviv. Along the way, they managed to save a young couple, people about my age, who ran away on foot from the massacre at the music festival not far from our community. My parents saw them at the side of the road. They were hiding, and they tried to make a desperate run toward my parents' car, and my parents took them in their car to a police station in Ashkelon, turned around and continued going toward our community. When they got close, they split. My mom waited alone in a bomb shelter with the whole world on fire around her. My father drove with his pistol in his car toward our community, accompanied by 1 soldier who agreed to join him. And there was a gun battle. There was an ambush by Hamas targeting a group of soldiers that they ran into. They joined the firefight. They killed the terrorists. Several of our soldiers were wounded there. My father took them back with him in his car, and from there my mom took them to the hospital. And finally, in the early afternoon hours, my father managed to arrive to our community. He joined a group of soldiers. They started clearing the community, going from home to home, until they reached our home. It was after 4 p.m., more than 10 hours in the safe room. And we were saved. And our story had a relatively happy ending, but it was a very difficult day for our community. We lost 15 people. We have several people who are kidnapped in Gaza. And we don't know when we will be able to go back home.
Amir, during these 10 hours, what do you tell your family while you're sheltering in place, hearing terrorists just outside your windows?
we told our two young daughters, who are 3.5-year-old and 1.5-year-old, that they just have to be very, very quiet because it's a dangerous situation outside, and they have to be quiet. And at some point, cell reception was not a constant during the day. There were many blackouts, but at some point we did get a text message from my mom that my father was on his way. So we started telling them that if they stay quiet, their grandfather will arrive. And so we just waited.
Your father's story, because you mentioned that he did come to your rescue after these 10 hours. How did that work for him? What was his story on that day?
So like I said, my parents drove down from Tel Aviv. Along the way, they saw this couple that ran away from the party, and they saved them. And then they split, and my father was driving toward our community, saw this ambush of the soldiers, joined the firefight, helped kill the terrorists. It took a military-grade weapon from one of our soldiers who had died earlier this day in the ambush, took back the wounded soldiers, and then returned finally to rescue us together with a friend of his, another retired general, Israel Ziv, who was in the area.
Since then,
and in the community, when they got there with the soldiers, they went from home to home. They didn't come immediately to our house, but they helped clear the kibbutz from terrorists from home to home. And there were many, many stories on that day of Israelis, citizens, soldiers, policemen who took initiative and went to save others and went to fight. The military as a whole, the entire government as a whole, did not function on that day, did not provide security, but people who went out and fought saved many, many lives.
Amir, since that day, I understand you've met with several major Western leaders to understand the situation, to tell them the story, and how have you felt about the international support that Israel has gotten in that time?
The most important person I met is President Biden. When he came to Israel, he invited 12 Israelis who had been impacted by the war to come and meet with him. And President Biden's support for Israel will go down in the history books because what he has done for us is incredible. Coming here in the midst of this war, the first American president ever to visit Israel during an ongoing war, sending the aircraft carriers, meeting Israelis like myself and others who had gone through this event, and providing a hug and listening to what we asked from him. And also his work to release the hostages. We've already had 4 of our hostages released, 2 of them dual Israeli-American citizens from my own community. And I'm eternally grateful to President Biden for his support of Israel. I know he's also paying a political price for it, and we are lucky to have him there.
Absolutely. Amir, thank you for being here to tell your story. I'm glad that you, your family made it, and the nation